Many of you will recall this patch behind me, which had the problem that there were trees too close to it, and a few weeks ago I felled those trees and got them out of the road. Because the eucalypts were sucking the nutrient and particularly the moisture out of the ground, it was creating a real problem growing here, and last season I really didn't grow anything here of significance. Over winter it did have green manure in it, and then it has been under plastic, and now I've cultivated it so that it is ready for me to start planting. What I'm planning to put in there this year, because my garden rotation calls for it, is my main tomato crop, and that will go in this side of the bed. I'll have 2 rows. I think I've got around 20 plants of tomatoes there. I have to check that to go in, and I'll talk about those in a minute. But in the other side I'm going to experiment. Growing watermelons in Tasmania is a little bit of a novelty, and really people don't generally take it on. But I've decided to have a go again this year. I have tried it in the past in the greenhouse. What I grew there was just standard watermelon seed, and it didn't do that well. The problem is that the majority of watermelon varieties require a fairly long season, and the Tasmanian season is quite short. And what that meant was that they were ripening in the middle of autumn, a time that watermelons are not so exciting anymore. The weather's starting to cool off and you're really not that interested. They didn't grow very large, they were only small melons, but it did produce. So I'm hopeful that using the right varieties I can actually get something to happen here. Now I've got 3 packets here that I'm going to try, and these are heritage varieties that I've got from Diggers, which is an Australian heritage seed company. The first one I'm trying is Sugar Baby, and it claims a very short season of only about 10 weeks, so hopefully that really should work for us. The other one I've got is Sweet Siberian, and the third is Cream of Saskatchewan. Look, I have had Sugar Baby before, the other 2 I've never seen or tried, so it's all an experiment. Now you'll see these packets have been opened. The reason is that I have actually planted some seed in pots in the greenhouse, because I also intend to grow some in the greenhouse in the bed that I've currently got potatoes in, and they'll come out in a couple of weeks, and then I'll plant those ones in there. And it'll be an interesting comparison to see whether the greenhouse ones or these outdoors do better. This area I have chosen for this experiment because with the 2 metal fences around, it really does get quite warm in this corner, and I'm hoping now that the trees are gone that I can keep the moisture up to it and it goes okay. So I have to get on with it. I have to form up some beds here for the tomatoes, and to put out my reinforcement trellis to actually plant those, and then I can prepare to put these watermelon seeds in. The day's really warmed up despite the overcast conditions. Now that I've got my trellises up and I've brought out these lovely tomato plants that have been developing in the greenhouse, I'm almost ready to plant these tomatoes. What I have here are my two favourite varieties for growing in Tasmania. These are Romas, and you can see they're really growing nicely. They've been about a month since I actually potted them on from buying seedlings. Yes, I was lazy and bought seedlings instead of growing them from seed myself. They are my choice for bottling. Every year I say that I'm going to try Amish paste, but I never get around to it, or haven't yet, but one of these years I will. But the Romas do really well here. The second tomato I have here is the Rouge de Marmande, and I don't know if that's how you pronounce it properly, but it's the way I do. And this is my choice in terms of a table tomato here in Tassie. The reason I choose this one, it's a really good short season tomato. It comes into fruit very, very quickly, and so you can get your fruit quite early, even though I'm planting them out comparatively late. So yes, really good, and handles the cooler conditions really well. So they're my two that I'm going to plant out. But before we plant these out, let's go do the easy job and get these watermelon seeds in. With these watermelons, I have, as I said before, 3 varieties, and I have put them in pots in the greenhouse, and I've noticed that Sugar Baby has actually germinated the fastest. So I think it's probably going to do the best in the short season outdoors. I only have 8 spots here to plant where I've put some compost down on the soil, and of course some fertilizer underneath, mostly blood and bone. So I'm going to plant 4 lots of the Sugar Babies and 2 each of the other 2 varieties. Of course, planting watermelons is fairly simple. We will start with some Siberians. I'll whack those in, and these are an unusual seed because they look like they're immature and look like they wouldn't grow, but we'll put them in, we'll see what happens. I'm putting in 3 per hill to give a little bit of a margin for error. It'll be really interesting to see how these watermelons go. In a couple of weeks I'll plant out the seedlings that I have in the greenhouse and keep those in the greenhouse there, and we'll see which does the better, the outdoor or the indoor, and which fruits first and gives the best fruit. So now it's time to lay out these tomatoes. I have actually 18 plants in total to plant out, which is quite enough. I think I had 20 last year and it was actually too many, particularly of the Romas. Tomato plants do best when they're planted nice and deep into the ground. That's why I appear to be burying them a little bit here. The other thing worth noting is that I wouldn't be planting these out on a warm afternoon like this if I had disturbed the roots, but because they're in pots and I'm able to get them in the ground without disturbing the roots, it means I can safely put them out on a day like this. I will of course still water them in well so that they have a good start. The next stage is to prepare this for summer watering. Now, those of you that have seen the video last year will recall that because tomatoes don't like water on their leaves, I experimented with putting bottles into the ground and filling that with water. This basically failed because I simply didn't get around often enough and fill those bottles with water. It wasn't a fault of the system itself, it was simply that I didn't have the time to come and fill the bottles. So in the end I used a weeper hose. And so this year again I'm going straight for the weeper hose, and I'm going to put that through these tomatoes, and that'll allow me to really saturate the ground nicely without putting any water on the leaves. And simply hooking that weeper hose up on each bed for one night, I found really waters it well, and the next night on the other bed. And I need to do this at least about once a week, depending on the rainfall of course. Maybe next year it's a better idea to put the hose in before I put the plants. I think it might be a little bit easier. Get the hose in without damaging the plants. Now that the weeper hose is in place, I can come in and put some mulch around. I'll put some compost down first, and then I think I might actually get some sugarcane mulch and put over the top of that because it doesn't have seeds in it. I haven't got it at the moment, so it'll have to wait for another day. But I can get some compost around right now. With the weeper hose being covered up, it'll mean that there's no evaporation of the water really going on. It's going right into the soil, so it should be really good. I always feel really good when tomatoes are planted because it's, to me, a real sign that summer is coming and we're going to be enjoying some delicious tomatoes.
I love tomatoes.